everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back. This is Pop Culture Warrior. I am, of course, CQ. Boy, howdy. I am excited to have this conversation with our guest tonight. My guest tonight has been illustrating hit graphic novels from Marvel and DC Comics for years on characters ranging from The Defenders to Superman, and has worked with commercial clients ranging from T-Mobile to IMG Models to Sarah Silverman. He's worked on the feature documentary Comic-Con Episode 4, A Fan's Hope, with director I can't talk tonight, Morgan Spurlock. And he's worked on the TV series Who Wants to Be a Superhero for NBC Universal, as well as numerous other projects with Stan the Man Lee. He was the artist behind the Gotham Stories motion comic about the Fox TV series Gotham, as well as Wonder Woman 77, which was the smash hit comic set during the Linda Carter Wonder Woman years. His poster artwork has been exhibited at the 8-Bit Gallery in Los Angeles. You can check out more of this amazing man at his website, matthaley.com. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our very special guest for tonight, the incredible Matt Haley, everybody. Yay! One day there'll be an applause. There'll be an applause for you. Imagine a crowd of applause for Matt Haley. How you doing, man?
I'm hanging in there. Like I said, I'm a little under the weather. I apologize, but I am got some NyQuil in me, or rather some Jaeger, and so I think I'll be okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So for the folks at home, guys, usually I do a nice little split screen. We get our guest on camera. He's a little under the weather, so we are appreciative. I tried to talk him out of it. I swear. I tried to talk him out of it, but he was insistent on wanting to utilize his sexy, phlegmy voice to be on the show tonight. So thank you so much for your time, Matt.
Thank you.
Right out the gate, first thing I ask everybody, what is your connection to the military?
Well, I never served. Excuse me. I never served. When I was doing comics full time, I had a lot of fans who were service members. Oddly, a lot of Marines. Semper Fi. If there's any Marines out there, I guess a lot of service members love comic books. Maybe that's why they join up. I don't really know. But the only connection I've got to the military, and it's kind of funny, we uncovered my dad's genealogical records of the Haley side of the family, going all the way back to before the Revolutionary War, and we discovered there was a Captain Haley who served in George Washington's Continental Army 3 separate times. We found his pension papers. He got $80 a year.
Wow.
And I think there was some members on my mom's side who served in World War I. In fact, there might be some on my dad's side. As far as World War II, I don't actually remember, but I wouldn't be surprised. But I think after that, no. So that's going back quite a ways.
No, but I mean, you have a lineage of military that few people have. I mean, that's incredible.
Me, but yeah.
It's in the blood, man. It's in your blood. Right? And you did touch on something about the idea of a lot of military veterans, being fans, and I do really believe that there's a correlation for a lot of guys who serve that, like myself, who felt like good versus evil, right versus wrong, heroes and villains, and playing into that. I don't want to say stereotype, but playing into that, thing of it. I have a whole side theory about, I can write a whole thesis about that. But
that makes sense,
yeah. So as I really pride myself in learning about my guest and doing the deep dive, getting to know you before we even get to speak.
Right.
As I was looking into you, you've been credited. So in the art world, let's call it, you've been credited as a colorist, a cover colorist.
God, I hope not.
It's out there. I'm telling you,
really?
Penciler.
I draw.
Layout, inker, artist, cover artist, all these different things. But then there's the entertainment world, where you've been credited as director, editor, producer, writer, costume designer, and I even found puppeteer.
Yes.
Okay. So my question is, what do you consider yourself?
I would have to say I'm a director. I got into comics when I was 20 years old. I quit college. I went to college in New Mexico. Hang on a second.
Sure.
So I went to college at Eastern New Mexico University. I grew up in Albuquerque and just really didn't want to stay there. But I didn't really want to get like a job. You know what I mean? Like we talked before, I did some radio and that's fine. But I really never had a 9-to-5 job. And I got in drawing comics. I was drawing Star Trek when I was 20 years old. I was a little young. You know, I couldn't hit a deadline, but my art was good. And so I just sort of quit college and started working. But I would have to say that while I used to call myself a comic book artist, these days I'm really not. I'm a director who can draw. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So about 10 years ago, I got into live action directing and just wanted to do it. You know, there's a sort of a story behind that I'll get to that relates to the puppeteering. But because I can draw, and a lot of artists that I know, men and women who do comics, especially when they're really young, it turns out that's a really great training ground for any other artistic discipline. So in my 20s, you know, my friends that I went to high school with, you know, they were pumping gas or whatever it is kids do in their 20s. I was drawing Batgirl. That was my job. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean I'm better or worse than anybody. It just means I got a really early on-the-job training. And so now, 30 years later, like I consult for Microsoft right now doing creative stuff, and I can just sit and I can just draw it. Or like if I'm on set talking to my actors or talking to my DP, I can just sketch, well, here's kind of what I'm thinking of. And I'm really grateful for the training I got in comics, even though the business was not great, because now it's really helped me in the commercial side and in the entertainment world.
Sure. Sure, absolutely. You know, we gain knowledge through our experiences, whether or not it's something we pursue further. A couple months ago, we had the creator of How I Met Your Mother, Carter Bays, and we had him on the show, and he was talking about how he got his start writing sketches for like the David Letterman show. And so, you know, you wouldn't really think like, oh, from there you can go on to creating a sitcom,
Sure.
But that's what it is you're doing this thing, you're gaining the knowledge, and then you see where it takes you. You see what the next thing takes you to. So I want to, you know, start at the beginning and kind of, and then catch us up. And you gave us a little sneak peek. So, you know, from what I read, and this is a direct quote, you are the son of a renowned portrait artist. Is that accurate?
I don't know if she's renowned or not, but she was quite good.
Okay. I was going to say, I'm quoting the article that I read. But that
might be embellished a little.
Yeah. And that, but that you've drawn, like you've been, you know, involved in drawing since practically the time you could hold a pencil. So this is something that goes as far back as you can remember almost.
Oh, yeah. I knew I was going to do comics when I was like 5 or 6 years old. That's just what I did. Once it was made clear, once it was made clear that, people make those. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I'm a person. Maybe I could grow up and make comics. And I just didn't, as I got older, I thought, you know, as I would hone my skills, because I was pretty much ready to be published when I was about 18, 19. I wasn't fast enough. That came much later, but I was reasonably, you know, I could draw reasonably well. I remember thinking, well, I don't have to get a job at McDonald's. I can just show my samples and try to get work and get paid to do that. You know what I mean? Right. And so 30 years later, that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. And guys, I see questions coming in the chats. I promise I'm going to get to them. We're going to lay some foundational work, and then we're going to get to your questions. So keep them coming in, and we'll get to them. I promise. So as I was reading, by the time you were 16, you were kind of already creating your own like homegrown comic books, right? Yeah. What are the kind of stories, I'm curious, that a 16-year-old is putting out there in a comic book?
Well, the funny thing is they were just mini comics. I don't even know if I have any anymore. There weren't a ton of them. What I was doing was creating sample comic pages to try to emulate the comics I was reading in an effort to get a job. But the stories I was writing, it's funny, we're actually, I can't jinx it because we're so early in the process, but there's a thing I'm going to do, hopefully this next year, that is one of my earliest creations when I was like 12 or 13. It's not going to be a comic book necessarily. And that's all I'm going to say. But It's a real thrill to look at it and go, oh, my God, I dreamt that when I was 13 and then sat down and drew it. So the stories I came up with in high school, I was much more into science fiction. I wasn't much into superheroes, and I liked drawing women. So what I wanted to do was become a pinup artist like Vargas or Petty or Olivia or people like that. I draw men, fine, whatever, but I was drawing like sci-fi chicks with swords and laser rifles and things like that. So not a lot of superhero stuff until I started working in the business. Gotcha.
Okay, all right, right on. And it's important to note for the audience that you didn't go to art school. You're self-taught. You like this is just a repetitive kind of thing and learn by practice.
I couldn't afford it. I mean, I resolved when I was in high school not to have any student loan debt because I knew I wasn't going to get like a degree. But even going to art school, I mean, it's funny. I got accepted to Parsons. I got accepted to Pratt. I got accepted to Rhode Island School of Design. But I refused to get any student loans because even back then I knew it was a trap. And I was broke. We were a rather poor family. So I just sort of, well, I'll just, and in comics, they don't care where you've gone to school. They don't care about your resume. They go, sure. Can you meet a deadline? And is your art good? Great, you're hired, So.
Sure. I mean, there's, for those that don't know too, there is history of maybe artists, writers, and all that kind of being taken advantage of because of the position they're in, not being paid appropriately and all. And we can touch on all that too. But
sure.
and again, you kind of alluded to this, but you had your first big kind of assignment, 1990. You're drawing Star Trek for DC Comics, and you're 20 years old. I mean, what I can't fathom. I know what I was doing at 20, and I'm like, there's no way I'm drawing Star Trek for DC Comics.
Well, let me tell you the story. So yeah. I think I'm probably a bit older than you, sadly. Oh. So when the Batman movie came out, what was that, 1989?
1989, yep. First right. Batman.
So everybody, he was Batman was it, and the Bat stuff was everywhere. My college roommate, Tom Simmons, I became his penciler. He inked my work and a lot of other people for a number of years. We both went to college together. I was his roommate. He had a very steady hand, incredible inker. And we sat around going like, well, we should do some samples and see if we can get hired. And we thought, well, everybody's doing Batman. Why don't we sneak under the radar and pick a comic that's really poorly drawn and see if we can do better? And I'm not crapping on the artist who was drawing it. It's just not important who he was.
Sure.
Although he did ink me and it wasn't good. But whatever. It's not his fault. But we looked at the comic and went, well, God, I can do better likenesses than that. And so we're living in Portales in this, one-horse town, a little shack. I had quit college by then, and I was just doing country music radio. I was a DJ overnights. And we would work on our samples. And I just figured, well, maybe if our samples look really good and we get in front of the editor on Star Trek, then maybe we would get hired. And as it turns out, that's sort of what happened. Mm. Although we quit our jobs in Portales, we had found out about the San Diego Comic-Con. This would be 1990, I think, that summer. We quit our jobs. Tommy was working at Domino's. I was working at this radio station. And we drove from Portales across Arizona and Nevada to San Diego and stayed with a friend of a friend and just had our samples with us and just wandered into the Comic-Con like, oh, golly, look at all these people. And actually met an editor at DC, Dale Crane, who's not with us anymore, God rest him. And he was really cool. He looked at my samples and said, here's what you did right. Here's what you did wrong. Here's how you can improve. Go do some more. Well, the problem is Tommy and I had no place to live, and we didn't have a job. We had his truck. So we drove back to New Mexico. We hadn't been hired. I didn't have any money, and we ended up staying with an old buddy of mine, a buddy of his, actually. I think he was sort of like family friend of Tommy, Dr. Jeff Wilson. And he was a chiropractor in Tucumcari, New Mexico, which is even smaller than Portales, a little wide spot in the road. And Jeff said, as long as you guys are working on your comic book samples 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day, you can live with me rent-free. And so we did that, but we were only there for about 3 months, so it worked out.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that is such an amazing story because, the idea of like, well, this is what I want to do, and I'm just going to do it. Like, I don't think a lot of people have that nowadays where like, I'm willing to just drive. Like, I can't imagine, 20-year-old
really?
me picking up and driving to California and going like, let's see what happens.
We were both heavy metal meatheads then as now. We had a lot more hair then than we do now. And so, we're like blasting Megadeth and Slayer and Pantera and whatnot. And we just didn't want to get real jobs. I didn't want to get a 9 to 5 and have some dick with a tie tell me, put that box over there. I just didn't want to do it. And that's probably hubris on my part and not really being aware of how the world works. But I mean, I did have one 9 to 5 job many, many years ago for about 6 months. I worked at a service bureau and I got trained in like Photoshop and Illustrator. And I'm actually very grateful for the experience. But at the time, the comics market had bottomed out. My career was over. I was getting paid $12 an hour to commute for an hour, to have to get up at 6 a.m. to go to this place I didn't want to be. And I remember looking at my reflection in the glass in the train, because I took the train out there going, man, people used to ask for your autograph. You used to be a star. Because they really treated us like rock stars in the 90s.
Sure.
So, but it was a good learning experience. But other than that, I have just been freelance. And I keep my overhead low, but I just wanted to be an artist. I just didn't want to drive a bus, or I'm not demeaning anybody who has any other job like that. I wouldn't survive. I would get fired. You know what I mean? I have two skills: drawing and complaining. That's it.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with the idea of knowing, like, I know what I'm meant to do, or maybe I know what I'm not meant to do. So I need to find something else, like I know I'm not meant to do a desk job. It's not going to work for me.
I'm not sure I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure it's meant to be as much as I just didn't want to do it. So that's probably really just spoiled, Brad and me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's all it was. I didn't know what I couldn't do or wasn't supposed to do. It's just ignorance on my part. That's all it is.
Yeah.
I didn't believe I had some destiny or anything like that.
it was in the car. Well, I mean, because from now take an outsider's perspective, right?
Yeah.
From me hearing at 5 years old, 6 years, I knew what I wanted to do. And then, at 20 or 18, 19, 20, I'm going to drive out there. I'm going to get it done. It sounds like destiny. It was meant to be. It was in the cards for you.
We had a good time. There's been some starving. It's not like I'm rich or anything. There's definitely been some starving artist shit. So
I mean, can you call yourself an artist if you're not starving at some point? I mean, really?
Probably, yeah. I mean, thankfully not anymore. Or not for a while, but there was some back in the day, because I'm not the fastest comic book artist in the world. I was trained to be a penciler. And so people like Tommy would sort of draw and embellish over my pencils. He was brilliant. God, I miss working with him. He was just amazing. So, but I had to learn to ink and color and do all that stuff on my own. And it was just sort of over. And I'm still not that great of an inker, but I had to sort of pick up skills as I went. And then when I left the comics business behind, I discovered that the fact that I had done comics like month after month, I wasn't that fast. And I got into the digital art world. I was way faster, and then suddenly I was able to make a lot more money. Right.
Oh, and we're gonna you jump in the script on me, because we're gonna. I want to ask all these questions. But to level set for the audience, can you give us a quick explanation? What's the difference of the penciler, the inker, the colorist, that guy?
Well, it starts with an editor who's foolish enough to pick up the phone and call me, because I blew a lot of deadlines. Just very slow. Every elbow I drew had to be the greatest elbow ever drawn. No one's going to care. The writer writes a script, and a lot of comic writers want to be, particularly television writers, so they'll write too much dialogue. But then I'll take their script, and as the penciler, I've got to turn their words into visual storytelling. Most comic book pencilers, we've been drawing ever since we were kids, and we love movies in particular. We're movie fanatics. I still to this day always have movies playing, like John Carpenter films, Escape from New York or something awesome, while I'm working. And so after a long time, you just sort of pick up movie storytelling, visual storytelling, kind of through osmosis. And I noticed, and there was some education. I had some mentors. I didn't go to school or anything, but I had some mentors who would, I'd send my pencils to them, and they'd kind of tell me, here's what you did wrong. But you sort of pick up the visual storytelling. The difficulty for me was that I'm really slow when I draw by hand, because I felt like every hair had to be in the right place and whatnot. And as I did comics, I did it for full time for 10 years in my 20s, full time. My penciling loosened up because I started to really enjoy watching different inkers apply. What they do is they take brushes and pens and they apply India ink, which is supposed to be waterproof, right on top of the paper, right on top of my pencils. So once I've done my pencils and it's inked, my pencils don't exist anymore. So I always take photocopies of my pencils. I have a complete record of my career. But my pencils got looser, and I started thinking, well, I wonder if I could ink. Well, my hands aren't very steady. Someone like Tommy he was like the Terminator, man, just glacially steady hand. Beautiful razor-sharp lines. God, he was incredible. So then when the inks are done, this is before the digital age. The art pages are about 11 by 17 inches. They put them under a stat camera and shoot a negative of the art, and then create sort of a half-size version of the art they would give to a colorist, who would use Dr. Martin's dyes. They're basically watercolors straight out of the bottle, and paint, just like a coloring book, the different colors to tell the printer what plate was going to go where, and then go call-outs for, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. The letterer would then take those pages. Actually, it's before the colors, but then the letterer would write on the paper. You'd try to leave room in the comic panels, and they would draw the word balloon and draw the lettering, and I am the worst letterer on earth. That is such a specific skill, you know what I mean? Then when that's done, it's sent off to the printer. They print the plates, they print the pages, and then if we were lucky, we would get a Dilux back, which is just sort of a small half-size comic book where you can check it for tears in the film or hairs or things like that. And that's pretty much it.
Wow. So yeah, so that for because the layman goes, oh, there's a guy that draws it, and maybe there's a guy
Yeah.
that writes it,
Yeah.
and like, but it's a team of people. It is a team.
Well, not anymore.
Well,
Not anymore, but it was.
classically.
And I have to say that I'm really grateful that I got that training. I was one of the last generation to work in the pre-digital era where it was paste up and zip-a-tone and whiteout and razor blades and the whole thing. And so when I started working in like Photoshop, especially, it was just a digital version of airbrushing or of drawing because you can just create a mask and there's no physical paper. But the whole reason I started the TikTok thing was to draw on paper because I don't want to lose the ability to just sit down with a sketch pad and just draw something. When I'm 90 years old, I want to still be able to draw a pretty good human figure, you know what I mean, just with a ballpoint pen.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, okay. So real quick, because I want to touch on some of the audience questions.
Okay.
These are always a little bit random. So let's see. First one. What is possibly your top favorite good or evil characters to draw?
Good. Oh boy. I mean, I love Spider-Man. I've always loved Spider-Man. He has to have the underarm webbing or it doesn't look right. The 1960s John Romita Senior Spider-Man.
Oh, yeah.
I drew the Hulk. Excuse me. I drew the Hulk in the Defenders miniseries called The Order. It was my first Marvel gig. And I got to draw the Hulk like throwing tanks around and, bashing planes out of the air. And that was fun. I'm very much a Marvel zombie. Most of my output was for DC, and they've been very good to me. But I'm a hardcore. All I wanted to do when I was a kid was draw Spider-Man and the X-Men. That's all I cared about.
Nice.
But I didn't have the style they wanted at the time. So,
yeah, very cool.
The villain has got to be. That's a brain teaser. I got to get back to you on that one.
Yeah, you do a pretty maniacal Joker, I gotta say.
Yeah.
I like it, the kind of Joker that you look at and it's just like, ooh, like it.
Well, thank you.
Everybody
draws the Joker, and I like the idea of drawing somebody who's really weird and out there. Honestly, you know what? For that Gotham motion comics that we did to promote the show on Fox, drawing the guy who was playing the Penguin, man, he was great. And I never gave a crap about the Penguin when I was young. I thought he was a really dumb villain. They really figured out how to do it in that show, and I had a great time drawing him.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, another question. Captain Wayne says, what would you first suggest for new drawing artists? So I guess artists drawing, getting in that field of maybe a comic book art or just new aspiring artist, I guess.
Well, that's kind of a broad question. I'm not sure what you mean. Do you mean advice on drawing or?
Yeah, it's a vague question there, Captain Wayne. Let's say maybe wanting to get into the field of drawing and comics. Let's go with that.
All right. Well, the first thing I would say, don't just draw anime because everybody for the past 20 years, they're all drawing One Piece and anime. Look, I love anime. That's great. But it all looks the same after a while. They cannot separate themselves from other anime artists, and you're not going to get hired. You're just not going to get a job. So what I tell people, whether, kids or adults, a lot of them, they're like adults who are in their 30s and 40s who suddenly decided I'm going to be a comic artist. I'm like, man, that's great. And here's what you need to do. Take life drawing. Or if you can't, especially with COVID and whatnot, it's probably hard to do right now, but just take a sketchbook, even a moleskin notebook. I love moleskins because they're small, but they have really great paper. And take just a stupid ballpoint pen or a pencil and go sit outside and just draw people. Draw hands. Take a week and just draw hands. Just draw feet. Just draw ears. Just draw dogs. It doesn't matter. Just draw. And I can certainly give you some resources. In fact, I should post them on my website about anatomy books, but I really don't use a lot of those. The way you learn to draw is by drawing. And what I tell these people is just draw every single day, even when you don't feel like it. I just put in a 10-hour day today because that's what I do, even though I'm sick. But you got to draw even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it, because that's what separates the professional from the amateur.
Sure. And, sometimes a job is a job. You go, I don't want to draw Transformers fighting Power Rangers, but that's the job.
People talk about inspiration when it comes to art, and I don't believe in it. I believe in discipline. You make yourself sit down and draw, and then the inspiration comes from the fact that you're sitting there drawing, and I end up having a great time.
Yeah, there you go. Let's see. One last question from the chats from Heath. What is, in your opinion, what is Marvel's best comic? That's a tough one.
I don't. Well, okay.
I guess your favorite.
Here. What's that?
I guess your favorite.
My favorite. Yeah, I'm going back a ways because, again, Marvel was all I gave a crap about in high school. I didn't just go to the comic store. I subscribed to the X-Men, New Mutants, Excalibur, and I want to say one of the Spider-Man, like Web of Spider-Man. So they would mail those things to my house. And my stepmother I'd run to the mailbox. It comes like a brown wrapper. She's like, oh, is he ordering porn? I'm like, no, it's comic books, man. So all I gave a crap about was especially the X-Men when I was in high school, because Chris Claremont was writing it, Paul Smith, and then John Romita Jr., Dan Green, and then I think Alan Davis for a while was drawing it. But as far as the best comic, the best single issue, it's boy, I got to say X-Men 173. It's got to be 81, 82. The cover is really iconic. It's Wolverine in the brown costume and Rogue, a very early Rogue in a green costume on a black background that's running toward the camera. And Smitty, I've gotten to know Smitty in the intervening years, but he was one of my favorite sons in high school because his drawing looked like pop art. It didn't even look like comic art. So 173, they go to Tokyo and they meet like the Silver Samurai or something. The story doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's gorgeous. It's a masterclass in storytelling. It's how you do a comics, X-Men 173. The other one, for me, would have to be, and it's not one issue, but it's a collected trade paperback called Daredevil Born Again, which they used as the template for the Daredevil TV series, I think the first and second season.
Sure.
So that's Frank Miller before he lost his mind. Dave Mazzucchelli, who's one of the greatest comic artists who's ever lived. And they really ground Daredevil. I mean, he can't fly. He just has fast reflexes and has heightened, radar sense because he's blind, and that's it. But they do this incredible thing, like probably one of my favorite pages in any comic I've ever read is in one of the issues of the Born Again arc, which is 4 or 5 issues. Daredevil's fighting a guy, but he can't take him down. And then suddenly he's hit by Cap's shield, and then Captain America's standing there, and he's already holding an injured person, and he yells at Thor and says, put those gas mains out, or put those flames out. We don't want a gas main going out. And when we see Thor, he's just a silhouette. And so the sort of like superhero powered stuff in Daredevil, we didn't really see. They treated Thor like a force of nature, like a hurricane. He's just a silhouette, and the caption says, suddenly it's raining so hard it hurts. And then Iron Man is standing there with his hand out saying, that man is ours, that federal authority, back away. But the best panel I've ever seen in my entire life is something that your audience might really get something out of. I love Captain America because he's not about worshiping any particular political leader. He's about worshiping the dream of America, the dream of freedom, which is why I really love him. And there's a panel where the villain that Daredevil is fighting has got the American flag painted on his face. And Cap says he wears the flag. Daredevil says, I hadn't noticed, and takes off. And it's a silhouette. I got to email it to you, dude. You got to see this to show it to your audience. It's just a silhouette of Captain America, and the caption says, it doesn't mean anything to them, thinks the soldier. To them, it's just a piece of cloth. Sometimes I feel so weak. And I get choked up just thinking about that. It's just a silhouette, but it encapsulates who he is and why he does what he does. He doesn't do it for credit. He doesn't do it for fame. He doesn't do it for money. He just loves the American dream specifically.
Wow.
Right? I'll send you that panel, man. You
absolutely. I do. I got goosebumps. I got goosebumps, right? Man. You're telling me, walking me through it. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Good stuff. I feel like I want to take like a moment of silence. Like that was such a great answer that I feel like I just want to let it sit for a second.
I'll send you the image so you can share it. Like
absolutely,
you got to see it.
Absolutely, no, absolutely. Here's the thing: I have a faint memory of that image, so I'm curious. Yeah, I'm curious. I want to. I want to see it. I'll even Google it. But yes, if you have, I definitely yes, because that's. Yeah. We're gonna put that up.
So that's probably my favorite like arc that I've ever seen done. But again, I was reading Marvel hardcore when I was 12 or 13. I actually quit reading comics full time when I started drawing them because then I was at DC, and then I ended up at Dark Horse Comics for a few years. I was their artist in residence, and I sort of was reading a lot of independent comics because they were doing some really daring, wild stuff in the 80s and into the 90s. So as far as like recent Marvel comics, man, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, no, that's
I mean, for DC, there's like Killing Joke and Watchmen and Dark Knight, all the classics. As far as recent stuff, I don't know.
Yeah, no, those great answers. And our audience is probably older than you think, so you're hitting the nostalgia right on the head. So it's perfect.
Oh, good.
In fact, we're getting comments like, "Wow, I like how passionate this guy is." Like you're hitting the nerve.
It's a big deal to me, man.
Yeah, of course. It's. For a guy like me, it's like the fabric of who I am. I've got tattoos of my favorite comic book characters. So
the problem is the business sucks, but I'm passionate about the art form.
Yeah, for sure. Unfortunately, sometimes doing what I do and getting to talk to people and talking behind the scenes, you start to see, was it some of the luster fades, you know, you start to see some of the ugly side of it.
I mean, what the industry depends on is finding young kids like me and a lot of my pals who are like 19, 20 years old who've got talent, and then chewing them up and spitting them out because they can pay us a pittance. So, and there's always some hungry artist right behind us who thinks they're going to be famous. Or really, what it is they're like, "Wow, I get to draw Batman. Yeah, I get to draw Batman. Cool. Then what? Does that pay the bills? You know?" So it sucks, but I mean, I still love my time in comics. I would still do comics if I could do my own comic on my own terms, but it would take a while to come out because I'm kind of slow.
Yeah, yeah, and that was actually kind of the next thing I was going to talk about is because I have it that like we said, you worked for the Star Trek comic, you worked on Batgirl, Superman, Birds of Prey, Defenders. You got to work on this, but for those that don't know, especially when it was like you said, the Amazing Spider-Man, where it is a monthly, if not bi-monthly release. Yeah. There is you have to draw at lightning speeds to keep up.
Yes and no. So again, since most comic artists that I know don't have any formal training. There are a few, but like Jim Lee, for example, I think Jim had like a degree in mathematics or something, or physics or something, and then he, when he was like 19 or 20. Don't ever play poker against Jim Lee; he will rob you blind. He's a gifted telepathic poker player, but he just sort of started doing it. Or J. Scott Campbell, who started working for Wildstorm and then ended up creating, I think, Gen 13. Some of your fans might remember that. And a lot of artists like that who were self-taught, once they're thrown in off the deep end, it's really sink or swim. And J. Scott Campbell in particular got super good in about a year and a half. Travis Charest, who I want to say is French, I don't know, is another example of like his art was kind of weird. The eyes were set way too far apart when he first started penciling. And then like a year or two later, he was just a god. So a lot of artists in the 70s like Walt Simonson or Jim Aparo or Bill Sienkiewicz, when Billy first started working, they all kind of drew like Neil Adams because that was one of the big deal artists in the 70s. But after a year or two, they sort of started finding their own way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Barry Windsor Smith was drawing Conan, and the art was sort of And then a year or two later, he was like a rock star. He just something clicked in his brain, and he was doing work that like nobody could even touch. You know what I mean? I don't know how fast or slow he was. So The reason for all that is that because I'm self-taught, I had to kind of come up with a visual language to be able to draw not just well, but consistently well. And the difficulty is that my style is kind of naturalistic. I didn't have a visual language like Jim Lee or Jim Aparo, who could sort of like, and here's my Batman, or here's my Wonder, here's what a guy looks like, here's what a girl looks like, here's what a car looks like. I kept trying to make it really authentic. Like, for example, a lot of the Batman comics are Birds of Prey. My dad taught me about guns, taught me to shoot. I'm a lousy shot. He's an expert. But I wanted to make sure the guns looked real because it brought you into the story. The comic I drew at Dark Horse was called Ghost. It was sort of a female version of that pulp hero, The Shadow, with two .45 caliber pistols. So I found it at like a swap meet, a little golden, perfect version of a 1911 pistol. And I would just hold it up to my eye while I was drawing and would just pet because I wanted the guns to look correct. I saw so many artists. It was probably just their deadlines, but who didn't seem to want to put any effort into making it look dangerous. I mean, these heroes are facing people with guns and whatnot. Make it look real. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, instead of just a square block that has a hole on it. Yeah,
I wanted to put some effort into it, but it just meant that I was really slow.
Yeah. Awesome. And we're already running short on time, and there's so much I want to ask you, and I definitely want to get into, obviously, some of your later stuff with directing and the producing and the writing and everything. But just general quick question. I want to know, what is the feeling that first time, you see your name on the cover of a comic, right? You see the writer's name, you see the inker and the like, what was that feeling for you in that moment, the first time seeing it?
Well, we used to joke about that. I was in a studio for a while with guys like Carl Kiesel and Terry Dodson and Matthew Clark, Tommy, and some other folks. And we all used to joke, like, once we see our comics in a 7-Eleven on the spinner rack, that's when we've made it. And I remember thinking, well, maybe we should aim a little higher, fellas, But it's a cool feeling, but I have to admit, it was great. Don't get me wrong. Even though I had blown, like when I saw Star Trek and my name was on this 54-page annual, but I had blown the deadline by like 4 months and almost got fired. And so there's a lot of mixed emotions. It wasn't as cool as seeing my name on a director's slate the very first time I directed something.
Gotcha.
That's like being a rock star. That's like being on stage ripping out a guitar solo. It's better than sex. I felt like I left my body. So, but there is a similar feeling when you work. I think what it is that when you work on a comic book, most of the stuff I've done were like 54-page annuals, 80-page annuals, large graphic novels that took like a year to do. So I've been living with it for so long that when it comes out, I'm just more relieved that I don't have to draw it anymore.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a release. It's like
it's still cool, but it's
done. Yeah, gotcha. And you got into digital artwork, which kind of led you to doing, artwork for video game companies. You did stuff for Ubisoft and Atari and Sony and film and television. I mean, what attracted you to the digital side of it? Was it the efficiency of it, being able to produce it faster?
Honestly, so I've been doing digital art for over 20 years, for pretty much full time. When the Candy iMac came out, I don't know. I think it's because I had. No, I don't think it's because I had that job. Before I got that job and got trained in Illustrator, I don't remember the story, but I saw the writing on the wall and went, I better get into digital art now. It was like 1999, so I bought an iMac, the first little Wacom tablet, a scanner, which I still have, it still works, and a copy of like Photoshop. And I just stayed up for like a weekend, didn't sleep, and was just like, oh my God, I can color my own work. This is amazing. And just something told me that I better get in front of that or I was going to get left behind. You know what I mean? So, and then when I had that 9-to-5 job for 6 months, I got trained in Photoshop and I got trained in Illustrator, the vector drawing program. So when the company went under and I went back into doing comics and then inadvertently ended up at like LucasArts and Ubisoft and whatnot, I would tell them, well, by the way, I'm trained in Photoshop. I'm also trained in Illustrator. That made me really competitive because I could do both programs. Most people only do one or the other. So I'm glad I did it. You know what I mean? And now I don't even think about it. I've been doing it for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. Somebody was trying to call in to say hi. So,
hi.
Just so you know, but sorry guys, we don't take live callers when we have the guest on because we try to keep the show flowing, and you never know what people say when they answer the phone. So especially our audience. So I do want to say, you got to do something that I loved so much, was watching Who Wants to Be a Superhero. And it was this small thing. It wasn't the
Did you watch the show?
Absolutely. Every episode when it aired. I grew up a big Stan Lee fan. Obviously, I adore Stan Lee. He's the best. But the idea of like getting to bring to life a normal person to be a hero, like, I love the idea of it. It was like 2 seasons long. I mean, I know there's a great story that I heard on how I would love. Can you tell us that story? How you landed that job?
I'll make it really quick. So what got me into doing video game art was Craigslist. I had read an article in the LA Times. I was not even living in LA at the time, and discovered Craigslist and discovered job postings. That's what got me into Ubisoft. So I suddenly was doing video game art. So then I became obsessed with finding jobs on Craigslist. And one day they were putting together the shoot for the pilot. They were trying to sell the show, Who Wants to Be a Superhero. And I saw a casting notice in LA. And I thought, well, they're probably going to need comic book art for this show. Why don't I get in touch? So I sent him an email. Hey, here's my first horrible little website. Give me a call. An hour later, I get this panicked phone call from the producer. Oh my God, this is serendipity. How soon can you be here? I'm like, well, I'm up in Portland. We'll get you a plane ticket. Don't even worry about it. And then he said, like, do we have to, because people who don't do art, they don't really quite understand it unless they see it. He said, do we have to, mount a camera over your panels? Like, no, I'll bring my laptop. It's all digital. Oh, thank God. So I was able to get jobs like that because I could just put my office fit in a bag, get on a plane and go. Yeah. So we did the pilot. And then I thought, okay, we're going to sell it. It was going to be at MTV at the time. I thought, oh, this is fantastic. And I met Stan. And my TV career's taken off. And I had to fight for my job on both seasons. I had to come down to LA, go to Nash, the company that owned it, go in the office. Like, my art is what sold the show. What's the matter with you? But they did end up hiring me, and I got to do both seasons. And we got to do a bunch of charity stuff. And that led to a freelance relationship with Stan and his company for like 12, 13 years off and on.
Yeah. I was very fortunate to meet Stan 3 times throughout my life. And he was the nicest, sweetest guy. I mean, any amazing Stan Lee stories that you can share that just show how awesome he was, because he was always the best.
I always say that he was a very sweet man who always paid for lunch. I did a gig once for the NHL where they had turned, because Stan's brief was, we're going to take plumbers and we're going to turn them into superheroes. That was just his business model. So for the NHL, we were going to take all of the mascots and turn them into superheroes, the Blackhawks and whatever. And so there were a bunch of artists working on it. I did 4 comics. I didn't really care. I'm not the biggest hockey guy. It was a job, whatever. And I just wasn't really putting my best foot forward. I was doing it all digital and just trying to get out of the job and get paid and move on, even though I'd already worked for Stan like half a dozen times. I get a phone call. Stan never called me before or since, but he calls me at like 10 o'clock at night. Now, Matt, I understand. I've been looking at your art, and I just don't think this isn't the best art that I know you're capable of. So we're going to take some time. We're going to go over each and every panel and each and every line. And I'm going to tell you what you did wrong, and I want you to fix it, because if you don't fix it, and he didn't say anything like you're not going to get paid. He said, I'm going to be very, very disappointed in you. And I went, oh, no, I can't live with that. So for 4.5 hours, I'm on the phone with Stan. Yes, Mr. Lee. Yes, absolutely, Mr. Lee. I went back and I redrew all 4 stories. And, of course, it was the year they had a work stoppage with hockey, so I don't even know if that thing ever came out. But at least when I met him the following year and I went to his office, oh, I remember that. You listened to me and you did a much better job. You should be proud of yourself. So that's my Stan Lee story. I mean, everybody who worked for Stan, we all have a bad Stan Lee impression. All of us.
I mean, yeah. Oh man, that's. I mean, what an awesome experience! Like that.
I learned a lot.
For you, I can't imagine. Somebody who grew up reading comics, and obviously Stan Lee has a big place in comic history.
Absolutely.
I mean, the brain that birthed the Marvel universe, pretty much.
Well, I mean, a lot of the artists, the problem is when I started working for Stan, I already had kind of a chip on my shoulder because I believe it was the artists like Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko that really created the Marvel universe, John Buscema especially. Right. So I felt like Stan, I don't want to get into that stuff. I love Stan. He was always very nice to me, but I wish I'd met some of those cats. I never got to meet any of the classic artists.
Sure.
But I got to meet Stan, and he taught me a ton. So I will always be grateful to him.
Yeah, and it's one of those, right? It's one of those things of going, okay, let's take a sitcom. It's like, well, I'm the writer. I put the words out there. Well, I'm the actor, and I brought the character to life. Well, I'm the director, and I put it together. And so it's like, who really? I mean, it's a team effort.
Well, I'll tell you who really does it is the editor.
There you go. He puts it all together, right?
The editor is the unsung hero of comics and of film and TV.
You heard it here first. Well, since we're running, man, so long on time, I really wanted to dive into too, and maybe we'll do a part 2 sometime. But all the directing work you've done and all the what made you switch kind of tracks and move into kind of the visual medium and TV and film?
It's a longer story that we probably don't have time for, but suffice it to say that a number of people died around me in very short succession. Every 2 or 3 months, I was going to a funeral. This has got to be 15 years ago. And I remember having a panic attack in my office. It's while I was working, I think, on the 2nd season of Superhero, where I thought, oh, my God, I'm going to be next. Because I was constantly going to funerals, and all my good friends were dying. And it was really weird. And then my little brother passed on. And I just panicked and went, well, if I'm going to die tomorrow, I better do what it is I really want to do. And so I put together what little money I had, found a crew up in Portland, and just shot a demo for a feature we were going to do, which ended up not happening. But I got bit by the bug. And especially because I can sit down and I can, sort of draw. I'm not a professional storyboard artist, but I can draw shooting boards. And then I got a ton of training with an incredible woman named Judith Weston, who's been training me for over a decade on how to work with actors. So I just got bit by the bug, man. And I mean, the more I do it, I directed a pilot right before COVID, right before the lockdown happened. So I came back from the shoot and had hard drives full of footage. And I was like, well, I guess I'll just cut this myself. So I spent 6 weeks as happy as a pig in a wallet thinking, well, the world's going to end, but I get to edit my show together. So I try to do it as often as I can. Like I say, I'm really hoping we get to do this thing this next year. I don't want to jinx it, but stay tuned.
Yeah, no, and you got to come back and promote it when it happens because we're gonna do it. Yeah. So and real quick because there's so much that I wanted to dive into and we didn't get to, but people do have to check out your website. You offer up commissions. I'm just curious. Is it a way to keep yourself creatively creating things?
But I'm not. It's funny you bring that up. I can't accept commissions anymore. I'm book solid for a year. And so I did that experiment on TikTok just because I kind of wanted to. But sadly, I won't be able to accept commissions for quite some time. Right. So people that got them, they got them. But I did it, like I said, because I just don't want to lose my facility with drawing on paper. And that's really the focus of comic books is can you sit down and write a script, or can you sit down and just draw Spider-Man swinging across the rooftops on a piece of paper? That's really all it is. I just love to draw.
Yeah, and speaking of your TikTok, I know you reined it back a bit, but to point out that your first video gets is it 2.6 million views
That's so ridiculous, man.
of just
It was just
you
an experiment.
doodling Batman, right?
I hate TikTok. I hate the whole idea of TikTok, but I did it because I felt like, all right, I'll whatever. It was an experiment. So I didn't really take it seriously, and people have been surprisingly nice. And so I offered some commission just because I thought I haven't done a comic since Wonder Woman 77, and then I gave up on the TikTok because I just got stupid busy. I'm triple booked, so it's like I don't have time to put into it anymore, which sucks. But there's nothing I can do about it. So it was a fun experiment.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you get. I mean, that's how I came across your work, and hopefully you get back into, because there are so many people out there that need to be introduced to this world, right? The art world.
I might, for the project that we're hoping to do this next year, I might start posting stuff from that on the TikTok just because it's there.
Yeah.
But my numbers started falling. People started leaving because I wasn't posting twice a day or doing the cinnamon challenge or whatever the hell it is you're supposed to do. So
yeah,
I wasn't really taking it seriously, but people were really nice.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan. I agree that there are sides of TikTok that I think are just a waste of human brain cells.
Yeah.
But I love the educational stuff, the did you knows, the do it yourselves, and again the art. I'm on the art side of it where I love watching the creation of things, and so that it's phenomenal. But so where can people support you? Where can people follow you? Where can people see what you're up to?
Well, I don't have anything to pimp. Like I said, I'm just up to my neck, and I'm very grateful to be doing the stuff I'm doing, but none of it I can talk about, sadly. So the best place to find me is I post on Instagram as often as I can at Matt Haley Art. I believe my TikTok is Matt Haley Art as well. I don't actually remember. Or my site is just matthaley.com. I need to finally work with my assistant who keeps telling me she should take over my PR. I should let her do that. But I don't really have anything to promote right now. So it's really more like, here's the stuff I've done. Stay tuned. Probably Instagram is the best place.
Sure. Well, no, we're definitely gonna follow you. You'll see me creeping there now because I like to follow my guests, see what they are, and also because I'll be able to be like, hey, remember that guy we had on 3 weeks ago? He's doing this thing, and
yeah, exactly.
We become a family.
Instagram's fun because I can see other artists. I find it really inspiring. It's really great for art.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like I said, I'm so appreciative of your time. I know you're not feeling well.
Sure. That's okay.
So for you to take the time to be here on the show, this has been so much fun, and hopefully, is there anywhere? Because I'm curious because I know you posted up some artwork. Is there anywhere people can buy prints or anything like that? Are there anything like that out there?
Yeah, I'm probably going to build a new store. It's just like I say, I don't know how to put this. Everything really blew up in my career about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and suddenly things are very different than they were. Like, for example, when I first started TikTok. And so, yeah, I'm probably going to do that. I don't know when. The best thing to do is to find me on Instagram.
There you go.
Or TikTok again, but really Instagram I post more, and that's where there'll be some news, or there'll be probably an update on the site, just matthaley.com.
Fantastic. All right, guys, you heard it here. matthaley.com. You know where to say. Keep an eye out because things, fingers crossed, are coming, and we're gonna support.
I just don't want to.
Yeah, we're gonna support. We're gonna show up, and hopefully we'll have you back, and we can actually dive into those things and
stay in touch.
We'll catch the second half of your career versus focusing so much on the first half. But we really got into it.
Was more interesting.
Well, no, you've been an open book, and I really appreciate it. And the fans, they're saying thank you, and it was very insightful conversation.
Great.
Let me. I'll give you the last 3 seconds here to say goodbye to the audience, and then we'll toss it to a break.
I don't know. Merry Christmas, everybody. Let's stay safe out there.
Outstanding. All right, guys. This is Matt Haley. We're gonna throw it to a short break. We'll be right back with more after this.